Hi everyone, and welcome to Oil and Coolant Analysis. I'll be your instructor. My name is Tom Johnson and I am the president of JG Lubricant Services. We're a company that specializes in oil and coolant analysis for many different types of vehicles, and we're based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a retired oils engineer from General Motors Powertrain and from Allison Transmission. I hold a BS degree in mechanical engineering technology from Purdue, and I have over 30 years of experience in engineering. I wrote most of Allison's oil specifications and approved almost all of the oils that are on Allison approved list today on a worldwide basis for commercial and military transmissions. That includes both off and on highway transmissions for the commercial market. I developed, tested, and approved Transcend, which is a full automatic or full synthetic automatic transmission fluid. Some of you may be running it if you have larger motorhomes with Allison transmissions. I was also a member of the General Motors ATF, that's the automatic transmission fluid, and engine oil committees. And because of the work I did with the military, I was also a member of the U.S. Army Lubricants Review Institute, where we met to review engine oil testing, looked at data and looked at parts from testing, and then approved those oils for the U.S. Army for tactical and combat vehicles. So when we talk about doing oil and coolant analysis, we're talking about taking oil and coolant samples from engines, transmissions, and generators. When you pull up to the customer site and you're getting ready to, after you're inspecting the motorhome, you're getting ready to pull oil and coolant samples, I want you to remember one thing, and that is to take caution in that you are using the correct kit type for the sample you'll be taking. There are oil kits and coolant kits, and the kit part numbers indicate the tests that are going to be run on the sample when it gets to the laboratory. The oil test kit number is JGOA24. The coolant test kit is JGCA21. An easy way to remember this, and you'll note the underlines here, OA means oil analysis, CA means coolant analysis. So please take caution and don't mix up the kits. It makes it difficult if we get an oil sample with a coolant paperwork assigned to it, or vice versa. We get a coolant sample with an oil kit paperwork with it. So take caution when you select your kits. Once you've identified the component that you're going to sample and you've selected the correct kit, before you get started, we want to emphasize that we want you to take safety precautions. So always practice safety around running vehicles. As part of the procedure, you're going to be running the engine for a little bit before you take a sample. And that's true of the generator too, but mostly when we're talking about a full-up motorhome with an engine, when we're running the engine, we want to chock the vehicle before doing that and also apply the parking brake so we don't have any movement of the vehicle while it's running. So please take caution. In just a minute, we're going to watch some sampling videos that'll show us how to take samples on the engine oil, the engine coolant, and the generator oil. But before we do that, I wanted to take just a minute to say never reuse sample tubing, and you'll see this in the videos. But the sample tubing is like a needle, so we never want to reuse it because you could destroy the sample from cross-contamination between two samples. It'll throw off the results and it's just bad practice, so please don't do it. And there's plenty of tubing. Each kit has its own tubing sections included. Now let's watch as Larry Yeager, authorized representative for JG Lubricant Services, takes us through how to draw samples on engine oil, engine coolant, and generator oil.
So let's get started on the oil sample. The instructions say we need to run the engine for at least 10 minutes to get things warmed up. We've already run this to save us some time. So let's pull the dipstick out. And you'll see this is a very long dipstick since it is a diesel pusher. We'll take our 1/4 inch tube and lay it up against the dipstick here to see how long we need. And in this case, this dipstick's long enough, I'm just going to use this whole length of tubing. In cases where your dipstick is a lot shorter, you may want to cut off some of the extra tubing. I'd leave about 10 inches to a foot longer than your dipstick. That way you don't have to pull oil up through a lot longer tubing than necessary. But in this case, we're going to use the full length. We're going to insert this into our vacuum pump. I'm going to insert it in until about a ½ inch of the tubing comes down into the cavity. And tighten this knob up so that's snug. Take the lid off of our sample bottle and screw it onto the bottom of the vacuum pump. Make sure it's snug. And then we're going to insert this tube down in through the dipstick tube down into the oil pan. Push it down in until it stops, and pull it back out a little bit, and then we'll start pumping. And here comes the oil. Now your sample bottle is going to have 2 lines on it. It divides the bottle into thirds. So you want to get the oil in there so it's just up to the second line, so you have about 2/3 of a bottle of oil, so they have adequate supply to do an oil analysis. We're at a third right now. There, we're at 2/3. So I'm going to release this brass knob and pull out our sample tube. We'll let some of that oil drain back into the crankcase that's in the tube, and then we'll carefully unscrew the bottle. Put the cap on the bottle nice and tight. If there's any oil that got up in our cavity here, use your rag. Clean it out so we don't contaminate the next oil sample that we're going to do. Then we can remove the sample tube from the dipstick tube. And the tube gets thrown away. We don't use it over if we don't want to contaminate the next sample. Today we're going to show you how to pull a coolant sample out of this RV. There are 2 places to access coolant for the sample. One is the radiator itself, if it has a pressure cap on it. I think you're going to find that most cooling systems today on late model vehicles and late model motorhomes, you're going to find a pressure cap on the overflow tank itself, as with this RV here. Because of the design of the overall system, the radiators are so hidden and buried today, you couldn't access the radiator cap if it had one on the radiator. So they have moved the radiator pressure cap to the overflow tank, and that's where we're going to ask you to take the sample. For your safety, we're going to ask you to take a sample on the cold engine. Engines at normal operating temperature could have anywhere from 8 to an excess of 15 pounds of pressure in that system. It is not recommended to pull the pressure cap off a system at normal temperature with that kind of pressure in the system. It can be very dangerous. So for your safety, we're going to ask you to do it on a cold engine. Now, if your vehicle has been driven in the last day or so, then you can just go out and take the sample. If it's been stored and set like this RV has for several weeks, then I'm going to ask you to drive this unit about 30 minutes, get it up to normal operating temperature, bring it back, let it cool down overnight, and come back the next day and pull that sample. Your sample kit will have a bottle in it that the sample will go in. It'll have a piece of plastic tubing that will pull the sample with. It'll have a padded mailer to mail the sample in. You'll have some forms to fill out, a sample information form and a component registration form. And it'll have a set of instructions that will walk you through the process. I'm going to suggest that you have nitrile or latex gloves to protect your hands, and it's always nice to have a shop towel handy. You're going to need a vacuum pump to pull the sample. Now, if you've seen our other videos about pulling oil samples, you'll notice that I've used a red pump to pull oil. We're going to use a blue vacuum pump to pull coolant. We don't use one pump for both samples because we can contaminate our sample that way. So we're going to use a blue pump for this particular coolant sample. These pumps are also available from JG Lubricant Services. Let's get started. Let's pull our radiator cap off our overflow tank. Pick up the vacuum pump, pick up my piece of plastic tubing. I'm going to insert this tubing into this knurled brass colored knob and stick the hose in here so it's about a ½ inch into this cavity where the bottle screws on. I'm going to tighten this knob up nice and tight so I can't pull that tube out. I'm going to take the lid off of the sample bottle and screw it on nice and snug to my vacuum pump. Now I'm ready to pull that sample. I want to put this down in so I'm not all the way to the bottom. I want to pull it back off a couple inches so I'm pulling the coolant sample from about the middle of that reservoir. I'm going to activate the pump and pull the coolant into the sample bottle. I want it about 2/3 full. It's pretty good there. Now I'm going to release this brass knob. Pull my sample tube up out of the pump, raise it up, let some of this coolant drain back into the coolant tank, and then I'm going to throw this plastic tubing away because we don't use it again because it could contaminate the next sample. I'm going to carefully unscrew my sample bottle from the pump. I'm going to put the lid on nice and snug. Today we're going to show you how to pull an oil sample out of a generator on this motorhome. The RV lingo for generator is a genset. This genset is located back down in here and you can't see it right now, but when we get to doing the actual oil sample, we'll pull the camera in closer so you can see what's going on. But before I start, I want to share something with you that I learned doing seminars at RV rallies. The RVers resisted buying oil sample kits to test their generator oil because they said, well, I can change the oil and filter for about the same money that the kit cost. And in most cases, that's probably true. But the important thing to keep in mind here is that not only do you get to know what the quality of the oil is, what the viscosity is, and what the oxidation rate is, you also learn about the contamination issues like dust and dirt from your air filter, and coolant from your cooling system, and you also get to learn about any wear metals, things that might be coming apart inside that engine. So it's good to know ahead of time before something totally fails because the repair bill is going to be quite a bit less money. So you have your oil analysis kit. Inside you'll find the sample bottle that the sample is going to go in. You'll find a piece of plastic tubing that you're going to use to pull the oil out of the crankcase with. You're going to find a mailer that you're going to put the oil sample in to get sent in to get tested. There's going to be an instruction sheet in there that tells you how to do the oil sample and how to fill out the instructions, how to fill out the information form, and you have the information form along with mailing labels for your envelope. You're also going to need a vacuum pump to pull out your oil sample, and these are also available from JG Lubricant Services. I suggest that you have a rag or a shop towel handy. And I also recommend that you be wearing nitrile or latex gloves to protect your hands from the used oil. The first thing the instructions tell us to do is to warm up the generator. I've already run this for a period of time to get this engine warmed up, so let's go ahead and pull the dipstick out and get started. Okay, what I like to do is take my tube here and measure it against the dipstick, and then add about a foot to it. I'm going to cut that hole off. The plastic tube goes inside that brass knob on your vacuum pump, and insert the plastic tubing so it's about a ½ inch inside that cavity, and then tighten the knob up so you can't pull it out. Take the lid off of the sample bottle, screw it on to the vacuum pump, make sure it's snug, and now we're ready to insert this down into the dipstick tube. Plastic tube down into where the dipstick tube came out. We actuate the vacuum pump, and you can see the oil being pulled out of the crankcase. You want to fill the bottle up about 2/3 full. That's about 2/3. I'm going to release this knob, pull this tube out, let some of that oil drain back into the crankcase before we pull that plastic tube out. Okay, we have our oil sample in the bottle. We unscrew the bottle from the pump. Put the lid on it nice and tight.
Now that we've watched the videos, let's look at how to complete your sample forms. There are two forms available. One is an oil sample form, and the other one is a coolant sample form. Oil kits will come with an oil sample form, and coolant kits will come with a coolant sample form. All of the forms have 3 sections to complete. There's the account information section, the sample information section, and the component information section. The account information section includes company name, contact name, street address, phone number, and email address. Most of your kits will include this information. When you purchased the kit, it was fed into the system, and this information should be on the forms as you receive them. If not, you'll need to fill this information in on account information. The second section is the sample information section. This includes component ID, secondary component ID, component type, component time, lube time, and application. For the component ID, you'll want to put the VIN number, the vehicle identification number, followed by a 2-letter sample identifier, which we'll cover in a minute. The secondary component ID should be the RV or tow vehicle, year, make, and model, if you're doing a tow vehicle. Component type will be either oil or coolant, and for oil samples, this would be either the engine, that could be the main engine or the generator engine, and it could be diesel or unleaded. You'll want to check which one it is on the form. Or if it's an automatic transmission, which is also an oil sample, you'll want to check automatic transmission. On the coolant forms for coolant samples, these will be either engine coolants or the aqua hot heat transfer fluids, and you'll want to mark the forms accordingly. The component time is the actual mileage on the vehicle itself or the hour meter on the generator. So this will be either the odometer reading or the hour meter reading. The lube time, which is generally unknown to most RV inspectors, especially on used motorhomes. Typically, no one knows how much time is on the oil or the coolant. But if you did know this, or someone knew it, it would be in terms of number of miles on the lube itself, or the oil or coolant itself, or the number of hours on the oil or coolant. Again, generally that's not known, so generally you would just leave that blank or say unknown. And then the application would be recreational vehicle for any motorized vehicles, any motorized RVs, or automotive if it's a tow vehicle. Under component information, we want to add the component manufacturer, the component model, and also the product manufacturer, which pertains to the oil or coolant being sampled, the product name, and the viscosity grade. Under manufacturer, the component would be, if it were an engine, it would be Ford, GM, Cat, Cummins, or perhaps Cummins Onan if it's a generator. Or it could be an Allison transmission. So you'll want to put that down as the manufacturer, and then the model if you can find it, or if you know what it is. In the case of an engine, that would be like a Cat C15 or C12, a Cummins ISL or similar. If it's an Allison, it could be a 3000 or 4000 MH. Or if it's a tow truck, it could be a 8.1 liter, or some of the smaller front wheel drive RVs could be 8.1 liter engines. Under a transmission, again, it would be a 2000 mH, 3000 mH, or 4000 mH, because all Class A motorhomes, especially big diesel pushers, would have an Allison transmission, and these are Allison model numbers. Under the generator, it's generally something like a quiet diesel or QD 7500 or a QD. Could be, that indicates wattage, so it could be 7500 to 8000 or maybe even 10,000 watts. So anyway, you can find that on the plate on the generator. Under product manufacturer, here we're talking about the oil or the coolant itself. So oil samples would be something like Shell or Mobil or Chevron, and coolant sample would be Peak, Prestone, Final Charge, something like that, if those are known. And then heat transfer fluid in an aqua hot heating system would either be Camco, which is a pink colored fluid, or Century, which is a lime green colored fluid. And then we'd need the product name, which would be like Shell Fire and Ice, or Mobil 1 Delvac, or Chevron 1300, or something like that. And then the viscosity grade for diesels would be SAE 15W40, and for non-diesels or unleaded gasoline engine, it would be 5W30. When it comes to viscosity grade, that's typically unknown in a used motorhome, but we want you to put down something. And so these are the guidelines. Again, typically oil viscosity grades are unknown on used RVs. But if it's a diesel engine, we want you to use SAE 15W40 as the viscosity grade. And if it's an unleaded gasoline engine, we want you to put down SAE 5W30. And 99.9% of the time, you're going to be correct on this viscosity grade. That will help us to evaluate the actual viscosity in the oil when it comes in for testing. And then if it's a transmission fluid, you'll want to put down custom as the viscosity grade. A couple of slides back, we mentioned component identifiers. These are the identifiers, the two-letter designators that you'll use for all of your samples. For engine oil, we want you to use EO for transmission fluid, TF. For generator oil, GO. For engine coolant, EC. For generator coolant, GC. Aqua hot systems would be AQ. Hydraulic fluid, HY. Differential or rear end oil, DF. And power steering fluid would be PS. You see an example here of the VIN plus the two-letter identifier. In this case, we're looking at an engine oil sample, and there's a typical VIN number followed by a space, or you can use a hyphen if you'd like, and then EO for engine oil. Here we see a typical advanced single oil analysis form. This would be the same form for a 3-pack as well. And if you look at the form, you'll see the 3 sections we talked about: account information, sample information, and component information. These 3 sections should be filled out in entirety. as best you can, that would make for the best possible analysis. Here we see a typical coolant analysis form. And again, the three sections we talked about: account information, sample information, and component information. Here again, we want to fill out as best we can to get the best sample results possible. The more information you can give us, the better we can do. And we realize that on used motorhomes, a lot of times we won't know. Now we want to tag the samples. We'll first remove the tracking code, which could be a barcode or what's known as a QR code. The barcode looks kind of like a UPC barcode, and it's shown in the picture to the right on the jar, or it could be a QR code. Some of our kits come with QR codes. And that's the funny looking square symbol with a bunch of dots on it. So you'll want to take that from the form, peel it off, and stick it to the applicable sample that matches up with the form, and then write the component ID on the tracking code, and then attach it to the sample jar. This aligns the form to the actual sample. When the sample arrives at the laboratory, it's scanned in using either the barcode or the QR code. Once you've collected all the samples and you're ready to ship the samples for processing, you'll want to put up to 4 samples in the white bubble pack plastic bag provided with your test kit, and then remove one of your peel and stick lab address labels from one of your sample forms. And this will be either the Indianapolis lab, the Houston lab, or the Salt Lake City laboratory, whichever is closest to you. And then ship the samples via UPS or US Postal Service. If you ship UPS, they'll go directly to the laboratory. If you ship USPS, US Postal Service, the post office, the local post office, will hold the samples and collect them all together, and then our courier service will pick them up every morning at 10:30 at each one of the labs. And always be sure to retain your UPS or USPS tracking numbers for your records.
Well, at this point, we're finished, and thanks for your attention. I so appreciate it, and hope you have a good day and good days to come with your RV. Thank you.